On the Iberian Peninsula, there once existed a powerful kingdom, heir to the Roman Empire. Magnificent cities that had once spoken Latin and Germanic tongues now heard a new language from across the sea. In 711, the Visigothic Kingdom of Hispania, weakened by civil wars and power struggles, saw its defenses collapse. A Muslim force made up of Arabs and Berbers crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and in a lightning campaign swept over the Iberian Peninsula. Toledo, the great capital, fell. Seville, Córdoba, Zaragoza. One by one, the jewels of the Visigothic crown were captured. To many, it seemed that the story of Christendom on the peninsula had come to an end. But in the far north of the peninsula, wedged between the storm-tossed sea and the impossible walls of the mountains, a spark of resistance still glowed, a spark that would give birth to a kingdom forged in adversity, a bastion of stone and stubbornness that refused to be extinguished. This is the story of the Kingdom of Asturias, a saga of how a handful of refugees in hiding not only survived, but began a centuries-long journey that would forever change the destinies of Spain, Portugal, and the world. This is the story of the cradle of the Reconquista. The Kingdom of Asturias made its home in the Cantabrian mountains, knife-sharp peaks that tear the clouds, deep, isolated valleys, dense forests, and a harsh climate. This was no place for large armies marching in formation. It was a natural labyrinth, a fortress built by the earth itself. Here fled Visigothic nobles, clerics, and soldiers who refused to submit to the new rulers. And among them emerged Pelagius. Later chronicles depict him as a Visigothic noble of royal blood, a guardian of the old order. Modern historians debate whether he was in fact a local leader, an Asturian chieftain who already knew those mountains like the back of his hand. The truth probably lies somewhere in between, but what matters is not so much his lineage as what he did. He united the local warriors and the Visigothic refugees under a single banner, that of resistance. The Emirate of Córdoba could not ignore this small pocket of defiance. It sent a force to crush the rebellion. And in 722, in a narrow, winding valley known as Covadonga, the destiny of Spain, as we know it, was sealed. Christian chronicles speak of a miraculous victory in which a small band of Asturian warriors, using the terrain to their advantage, ambushed and annihilated a much larger army. Muslim chronicles, by contrast, minimize the event, describing it as a mere skirmish. But the scale of the battle doesn't matter. What matters is its symbolic outcome. At Covadonga, for the first time, the tide of conquest was checked. The victory, small though it was, sent a powerful message. Resistance was possible. The Emirate, with bigger problems elsewhere in its vast realm, decided that pacifying those inhospitable mountains wasn't worth the effort. And in that gap, in that hesitation, the Kingdom of Asturias was born. Pelagius was acclaimed king or prince and set up his modest court in Cangas de Onís. It was not a realm of palaces and luxury, but a kingdom of survival. After his death, in the brief tragic reign of his son, Favila, who legend says was killed by a bear, power passed to a man who would turn survival into expansion. Alfonso I, the Catholic. Alfonso understood that for the kingdom to grow, it needed security. So he launched a series of daring campaigns not to seize and hold great cities, but to create a no-man's land. He struck the Muslim garrisons in the Duero River Valley, leading the Christians, who lived there northward, and devastating the region. That brutal tactic created what became known as the Desert of the Duero, a vast, depopulated frontier that served as a protective shield for the Asturian heartland. It was a scorched earth strategy that ensured the kingdom's consolidation. The first century of the Kingdom of Asturias was a constant struggle marked by battles against external foes and by violent internal power disputes. Kings were assassinated, nobles rebelled, Yet from this turmoil emerged the figure who would give the realm its definitive identity: Alfonso II, the Chaste. Alfonso II, who reigned an impressive 51 years from 791 to 842, was the great architect of the Asturian state. He moved the capital from Cangas de Onís to Oviedo, a site more central and strategic. But he did more than move an address. He transformed Oviedo into a royal capital, building palaces, churches, and walls. He wanted Oviedo to be a new Toledo, heir to the lost Visigothic glory. And here, we reach one of the most powerful ideas of the entire Iberian Middle Ages, the Neo-Gothic ideology. Alfonso II and his clergy actively promoted the notion that the Kingdom of Asturias was not a new realm, but the legitimate continuation of the Visigothic kingdom. They saw themselves as heirs to a usurped throne, and their fight was not merely for land, but for the restoration of a just Christian order. This ideology gave the Reconquista its legal, moral, and above all, divine justification. They weren't rebels, they were restorers. And as if heaven wished to confirm this divine mission, something extraordinary happened during Alfonso II's reign. In 813, a hermit named Pelagius claimed he had been guided by a star to an ancient tomb in western Galicia. Word reached the king, who traveled to the site. After investigation, the local bishop declared that it was beyond doubt the tomb of St. James the Greater, apostle of Jesus. The discovery of the tomb of Santiago de Compostela was a watershed. Suddenly, the small, isolated kingdom of Asturias possessed one of Christendom's most important relics. St. James became the patron saint of the fight against the Muslims. The battle cry, Santiago y Tierra España, would echo across battlefields for centuries. The Way of St. James was born, drawing pilgrims, knights, merchants, and the attention of all Europe to that forgotten corner of the peninsula. The kingdom gained a spiritual weapon and a direct line of communication with the rest of the Christian world. It was at this time that a unique artistic style flourished, Asturian pre-Romanesque. Monuments such as the Church of San Julián de los Prados in Oviedo and later under Ramiro I, the jewels of Santa Maria del Naranco and San Miguel de Lilo, bear witness to that era with their elegant lines, perfect barrel arches, and a sense of strength and permanence. They were the realm proclaiming to the world, "We are here. We build beautiful, lasting things. We are a civilization with ideological, religious, and cultural foundations firmly in place." The Kingdom of Asturias was ready for its great final act of expansion. His phase was led by its last great monarch, Alfonso III, the Great. Alfonso III, who reigned from 866 to 910, took advantage of weakness and internal conflict in the Emirate of Cordoba to carry the war southward. He led his armies beyond the barrier of the desert of the Duero. Key cities such as Porto, Coimbra, Zamora, and Simancas were captured and crucially repopulated. Repopulation was the key. It was no longer about raid and retreat. It was about occupying, building castles, founding communities, and pushing the frontier permanently south. Under Alfonso III, the Kingdom of Asturias reached its greatest territorial extent. He was a warrior king and a patron of culture and history. Under his command, the great chronicles were written that solidified the Neo-Gothic ideology, telling the kingdom's story from Pelagius onward and linking it directly to the Visigothic kings. He was consciously crafting the narrative that would legitimize his realm and inspire future generations. But Alfonso III's very success created a new challenge. The capital Oviedo, nestled in the mountains, was now far from the active frontier, far from the kingdom's expanding center of gravity. The Duero frontier was where the action was, where opportunities and dangers were greatest. The old capital of resistance no longer served a kingdom of conquest. And so, after Alfonso III's death and a brief succession crisis among his sons, his heir, Garcia I, made a fateful decision in 924. He moved the court from Oviedo to the city of Leon. Leon, set on a strategic plain, was the perfect launchpad for the next phases of the Reconquista southward.